Hello and welcome to the very first Pittsburgh School of the Arts podcast. I'm Destin LaCornu.
And I'm Kate Griffin. We're really excited to be here today and share our hearts a little bit about what we do as teachers and some of the values that we have. Our primary audience is for our very own teachers that are here at Pittsburgh School of the Arts, as well as our students and parents. But we welcome anybody else to listen in. If you're a musician or a leader or a teacher, we're excited to just talk about some good stuff today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we thought for our very first podcast, we'd talk about a really powerful concept called growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Just a little background on that. So I learned a lot about this in college because I studied psychology. I took an early child development class, and so I read a lot of research of just how influential mindset can be on success in academics, but in lots of areas of life. And so it's just something I feel like is really pertinent to what we do as teachers, because I see this played out every day in my students. And so I think we'll just start things off by talking a little bit about what this is. So it's basically the idea that if your mindset is fixed, you believe that your intelligence, your personality, your character is kind of set in stone. It's always been what it is, and it's never really going to change. And so it kind of goes hand in hand with trial and error. If you try something and you don't immediately succeed at it, you believe that you just can't do that. You're not good at it, and so you don't try again. And it's also this idea that, like, if something is hard, if it takes a lot of effort, then you perceive that to mean that you're just not very good at it. Oh, it's so hard. I don't feel like I'm really getting anywhere. So maybe it's just not worth trying at all because I don't really believe that hard work is going to pay off. So what this creates, the really sad thing about it is it creates a situation where you're always out to prove yourself, because if you believe that you can't really change, you kind of also believe that everybody else can't change. So you get really caught up comparing yourself to where others are at, and you think, well, let me at least prove that I have the intelligence and the skills that I have so that I'm not mistaken for being any less than that.
Yeah, I think having a growth mindset is so important for us as individuals, as people, like wanting to grow and develop personally, but then also it affects us as teachers, and it affects us in our students as well. I think we can all say that we've had students that have been afraid to make a mistake, or have been afraid if they don't get something perfect the first time.
Yeah.
And makes them nervous. They freeze up. Some more than others have that perfectionism in them. But I think that this is an important thing for us to apply personally, but also definitely when it comes to teaching.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and the difference with having a growth mindset, on the other hand, is that you view failure as a necessary part of success. Success is really just a series of failure after failure after failure, and then all of a sudden you don't fail. You kind of figure out all the ways to do something that don't work, and then you stumble across that one way that does work, and then you lock that away as like, okay, I've succeeded at that thing, but you know that there's going to be a whole nother string of failures to get even to that next level. But if you have a growth mindset, you know that everything that you are capable of at one time you weren't. And it's only through a lot of trial and error and hard work that you eventually became capable of that thing. So you become very comfortable with learning from your mistakes. You don't beat yourself up over them. You don't let it define you. You're actually motivated even that much more when you hit a dead end, because you know that now you're learning something new.
Don't you wish that was like an initial response to everything? Because I think
wouldn't that be easy if we were all just naturally wired that way?
And it's not the first response. Like, you come and
No.
It's uncomfortable. You feel like a failure. You feel these negative emotions, and I wish that I had a growth mindset and an emotional response as a growth mindset to every negative thing that came my way. But it's not a natural thing. It's something I think we have to be intentional about.
For sure.
And something we have to be aware of, and something that we have to try to build into others as well. I know I'm learning about this in my own life, and something that I wish that I was better at,
Me too, yeah. I mean, the reality is, like, none of us are just all fixed mindset or all growth mindset. We kind of have different levels of each in different parts of our life. And so I'm constantly catching myself on this when I start getting really self-critical and thinking, oh, I'm just no good at this. Why am I even trying? I have to stop myself and be like, wait, this is a growth mindset versus fixed mindset issue. And so you never stop learning this lesson. I mean, even some of the most successful people I know, it's amazing. You'll talk to them about something as simple as cooking, where they might just say, oh, no, I'm never going to be able to do that. It's too hard. I'm just not wired for it. Like, we kind of have this natural response to just quit at something before we've even tried. And so I think what I got really interested in is like that it's starting to become more known. You can go on Google, you can read all about this concept, but I've always been really curious of where does this come from? Why are we so predisposed to selling ourselves short? Because we just encounter a lot of people who they really aren't aware of their fullest potential, and it's really sad to see. So I started thinking, like, why would we want to hold on to a belief that we're not good at something? It seems counterintuitive. I think it's really a question of security. We all want to know who we are, and we want to be secure in that knowledge. We're just kind of naturally wired to preserve whatever beliefs we have about ourselves, even the negative ones. And we also want to feel valued by others. And so I think if we grow up in an environment where we're constantly being slapped with a label of like, this is how smart or not smart you are, we're going to be inclined to internalize that, hold on to it, because the letting go of an identity is painful. It's like irrationally painful. For some reason, it's just everything in our being wants to rebel against that until we just push ourselves through it and finally let go. But there's kind of this initial denial phase. And so I think, like, what would happen if we weren't investing our security and identity in our skills and abilities? I mean, skills and abilities are always changing, so it's really not a great thing to define ourselves by. What would happen if we felt loved and we felt valued just because we exist and we're human beings, and that really freed us up to then be comfortable with our abilities growing, changing, at times realizing we're maybe not as good at something as we thought we were. And then it's like we get to learn, we get to try and fail, rather than this desperate feeling of like, we have to succeed or else.
And this is challenging for me, even as a parent, like to think about, first of all, the way that I was raised. And thankfully, I had two loving parents who encouraged me and tried to build me up. And there was already, yes, of course, a performance mentality of like, set the bar high for your siblings. I'm the oldest of four, and good behavior, bad behavior, and just natural training that happens when you grow up. Mm-hmm. But to think, man, I'm really making an impact on my own kids in how I'm praising them, or in the words that I speak, or in am I praising their efforts, or am I praising just the outcomes? Like, how is this affecting, my own kids, wanting to do that positively, but also how can we create an environment where students are comfortable to really enter into this experimental phase where they can step out and try to grow and try to learn and try to do something that they've never done before, and not feel judged, or not feel like their identity is just in, being really good or not so good at something,
Yeah.
So it does, when you start to think about it that way, it's a challenging thought of like, man, what can I say and what can I do to make sure that not only am I wanting to have the right mindset about myself, but then the words that I'm speaking and the way that I'm encouraging those that are around me, what kind of impact am I making on them, and how can I keep this as lighthearted and encouraging as possible so that there can be growth that happens, and that they're walking in a proper identity, and they're not
Right.
placing their value in performance, but
Mm-hmm.
in really growth and in just being who they are and trying new things.
Right. Yeah. Well, something I've seen as a teacher is like, I see it from students, and I also see it from some of their parents as well, which is that they feel like if they're not hitting a certain benchmark in lessons, that they're wasting my time. And I've had people like apologize. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just not getting it. Like, are you sure? Are you sure you're okay with continuing lessons? Like they actually think it's a waste of my time, and that's my job as a teacher. That's what I'm getting paid to do. I want nothing more than to be there, if nothing else, just as a supportive person. I have some students where I feel like it's valuable just for them to hang out and talk about music, even if that's all we do on a particular lesson, just to be in that environment. That's goal number one for me. Is just I value my students, and I want them to see that like I'm not just looking for some particular level from them. I mean, ideally I'd like to see some progress, but it can be really, really small progress, and especially if you can teach students the value of like small progress, feeling satisfied with the tiniest of victories, that's actually more valuable than when a student comes in and maybe just by happenstance they get it right and they feel really good about themselves, but it's only just kind of a fluke, and then they come in the next week and now they're trying at something that they're just really struggling at, and they then fall back into this mindset of like, oh well, I guess I should just quit. It's really developing this pattern of seeing hard work and then a little win, and then more hard work and a little win over a long, long period of time.
Right. I always tell my students it's better for them to practice even 5 minutes a day than to just once a week sit down and cram for an hour before the lesson, because it's those little deposits that are creating that habit, that's creating that, regularity, that consistency of them coming back to the piano or the guitar, whatever, they're taking. Mm-hmm. And I feel the same way. I think that it's invaluable for parents to understand that this is the heart behind our studio, the heart behind our teaching. Philosophy is, this is what stands out, as it's so much more than just a weekly lesson that they're even paying money for and investing in. We are truly wanting to create a place where there's encouragement and growth that happens not just on a musical level, but on a personal level with their student. And that relationship that we create, it flows out into other areas of life, not just music. So I think this is huge.
Yeah. And so something you brought up, which is praising effort versus praising outcomes. That's something I really try to make a part of my teaching, is like, I have some students who might come in and they've already got a tremendous natural ability. They're naturally gifted in what they're doing. And I think sometimes this can be a tough situation. I've experienced it in my own life, where stuff I'm naturally good at is sometimes the hardest for me to have a good work ethic about, because maybe I haven't had to work that hard at it. And I've been able to kind of cruise by on my natural ability to a point, but then you hit a point where in order to go any further, you now really have to work beyond your own capacity. And so I think what I try to tell my students is like, to succeed at lessons, to feel like you've accomplished something from lessons, set a goal. It can be a really, really small goal, and then work at it, and don't move on to the next goal until you've actually mastered that one little goal. Don't jump too far ahead. But that's just a repeated series of that is going to lead to some kind of growth, even if it's small growth. What's not really going to lead to growth is coming into lessons just trying to impress me with what you can already do. I mean, that's great, but you're not really moving anywhere with that. But I feel sympathy for my students who do that again and again, because I see what they're really looking for is that validation. They're looking for someone to say, yes, you are, it's worth it for you to continue this. Yes, you are valued as someone who is learning a skill. But for me, like, I wish there was an easier way to communicate to my students that that's a given. Like, you don't have to earn that from me. I want to validate that for you right now, that no matter what level you're on, I believe in you. It's worth learning. It's worth continuing.
And I think that's so important. Like, and it's sometimes not super comfortable or maybe expected, but like just to even hear those words, great job, or I'm proud of you, or I tell my students who are getting older and they're getting into high school and they're getting pulled in so many different directions with school and sports and activities, thank you for making the priority of still coming to your lesson and growing in music. I mean, I'm proud of you for coming. I'm proud of you for pushing beyond the busyness of your schedule to still come and value this, because I enjoy, the time together, and I feel like it is productive, but I think that it's a rare thing these days for a young person to hear from someone maybe outside of their parents or their natural special family unit. I mean, maybe that stuff isn't even being said at home, sadly, you know?
Yeah.
But for a young person to hear someone say, I'm proud of you, like that is so powerful, you know? So I think that that's something that hopefully our teachers can all say on a regular basis, you know, to just sort of, like you said, it's a given. And yet it's not often translated. And so many times our students, they can't hear it enough. They're just like sponges. Because again, just that they are valuable, that they are worthy of just being spent time with, you know, and being invested in. They are being greatly impacted by those simple words, you know, just I am proud of you and you have value just in and of yourself before you even perform or do anything here at, you know, at the lesson or in music.
Yeah, it really can't be said enough. I mean, it's something that we often assume people know, but you almost can't assume that because you don't know how often someone is hearing that. For some of my students, not very often.
No.
And so
it's a huge honor to be able to, you know, encourage our young people in that way.
Yeah. So really what we've been talking about is the difference between proving yourself versus improving yourself. And that's, I think, something we really want to make part of our culture here at PSA is like we're all about improvement. You don't need to prove yourself to us. We have performance opportunities. We have competition. We have that atmosphere because it's healthy when the goal is improvement.
Right.
And so I think a lot of our job as teachers is to teach students how to learn. And I think like this is universal across anything that you might be learning, not even just music or the arts, but it's going to apply to every situation in your life. And this is why I think what we do is really valuable. Even if students don't go on to do something in the arts, we have the opportunity to teach them how to learn because learning is it's hard. It requires support. It's something that's really difficult for people to do alone. I think that's really one of the benefits of taking lessons or a class, even if you can go on the internet and learn as much as you possibly can on your own, just having that support system of a teacher and even your peers. It's something kind of cool that we're getting to see with the classes that we're rolling out is like having students not just in this alone, but actually getting to see kind of where their peers are at. And oftentimes it's sort of, how would I describe it? It's like there's less pressure that you put on yourself when you see that everyone is maybe struggling with the same thing. It's like, okay, well then, yeah, it's normal to find this difficult and we're all going to get through it together.
And when they relax and they're having fun, you know, it's a great environment to learn. So that's great. You said something earlier this week that when we were talking about this that stood out to me. And you said, as soon as I hear a student say the word can't, we go on a mission to prove that they can. Yeah. So just creating an environment to say, you know what, they might not have done that before, or played that instrument before, or seen that rhythm before, or played that composer before, but we want to develop that in them, you know. So it's easier to do that when you're around other people.
Yeah, I've kind of turned it into a game with some of my students where as soon as they say, oh, I can't do this, I sort of get this look and I'm like, oh, you know what you just did? You just put me on a mission to prove to you that you can, because I've seen other students do it at your level. I know you can do it. And time again, it's amazing to witness once they actually see that they can do it. And I see that attitude shift. I see that light bulb go off of like, oh, wow. My teacher was maybe actually right. And they're much more willing then to trust me when I put something in front of them that might look really daunting, but they now know, okay, well, this must not be something I can't handle.
That happened to me earlier this week with a student, and it was a book and a jazz book that he had been wanting to learn, this composer. And last year at this time, there were a couple pieces in there that were super intimidating and just really, really difficult, you know, so we picked something different. And now this year, as we've come back to that book, you know, because he had a good experience and learned something out of that book last year, he was super excited to kind of go back and to tackle those difficult pieces this year, you know. And so to see the light bulb go off in a student's mind when they do get to accomplish, you know, a piece that they've always wanted to play, or, you know, finally hit something and do it right all the way through without messing up, and you can see their smile and that they're so proud of themselves. I mean, that's what we live for as teachers, right? Is to be able to see those things happen been in our students' lives. And so this is something that really lights a fire for us, because it brings all the joy into why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think just maybe one last point before we wrap things up is I've been thinking about this idea of being versus doing. I always thought it was a strange question when people would ask you, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like, well, a person, and hopefully a happy and healthy one. But as for what I want to do, well, that might look like a lot of different things. I mean, I think the average person switches careers like 3, 4, 5 times in their lifetime in this day and age. And so I think the idea that you have to figure out what you're good at, like right at the beginning of your career, right when you're in high school, college, and then you just have to stick with that. I've seen so many people who I grew up with doing something that's completely different than what they ever thought they would be doing. There's so much freedom to move within your career, within your hobbies and your personal life. And so you don't have to judge yourself really ever at any point in your life. There's not like a time in your life where you have to say, oh, well, I guess if I'm not good enough at this point, then I should just stop trying because I'm never going to be good. I should just, I'm never going to make it. I don't think that is valuable today more than ever, because I think we're seeing a lot of people who are older, like I have students who are retired who are learning instruments, learning music technology for the very first time, and they're doing well. And I think there's so much value there in keeping a lifelong learning mentality.
Yes.
Because it's that there are so many studies that look into the benefits of like keeping your brain active, the parts of your brain that are responsible for learning and memory and problem solving. If you're constantly stimulating those parts of the brain, you're constantly inspired. There are so many positive outcomes that come from that.
I love that idea. I love the idea of being a lifelong learner. Something I just want to be personally, and have that teachable attitude and always be learning and always be growing, and to be humble enough to recognize where growth is possible, and to be able to say, okay, let me realistically be self-aware of strengths and weaknesses, so that I can be wise about that and how I move forward. But believing that learning is, it's a non-linear process. It's not,
yes.
And so we can grow, we can learn, we can weave in and out.
It's very non-linear. There's a lot of backtracking. There's a lot of unlearning bad habits. It's interesting because like some of my students will come in and they kind of immediately want to prove what they already know. And they're like, oh, this stuff, I've already got that. I've got that in the bag. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, you could actually do this a little better. And what if you tried it this way instead of that way? And immediately there's this kind of threat perception of, uh-oh, I'm about to lose something that I used to be secure in knowing I could do. If you can desensitize yourself to that feeling and instead look at it voraciously as an opportunity to like, oh, wow, this might, maybe there's something better for me. Maybe if I just let go of this knowledge and try this different approach, I'm actually going to get better.
Yeah.
And that's a lifelong process that never stops happening at any point in your life. I think it's especially difficult the older you get to be comfortable with unlearning things. If something has kind of always worked for you, you're going to continue doing that thing. But there's so much value in continuing to experiment and question yourself and consult other folks in different disciplines, different areas of life who might be doing something completely different or completely new.
And there might be more than one way to do something that you've always done. And whenever you take somebody else's idea or somebody else's approach, or you see the way another teacher or another musician or whatever have you is doing something, it can actually really benefit and help you grow even more because it gives you knowledge or a way that you maybe haven't seen something before. So I think that this mindset of teachability and growth and just having an open mind, is so valuable. I think it's a character trait almost.
It is, and there's joy in it too. I think that's like something I'm always trying to communicate to my students is it's not just all struggle. It's not just like, oh, hard work. I mean, there's this tremendous sense of joy on the other side of it once you've accomplished something, and then all the struggle was worth it. You realize, oh, well, that that wasn't so bad. I could do that again if I had to. And then you kind of get used to it. It just becomes habit.
And I think, like you said, there's an excitement to it, to recognize there's things out there that we don't know yet, and there's discoveries that are still to be made, and things about ourselves and areas where we can grow that we're not experts in yet. And that is exciting. It shouldn't be overwhelming or stressful. It should actually be exciting, like where we can anticipate and expect that there's new things that are ahead of us.
Yeah, curiosity just fuels me as a human. It drives a lot of what I do, and I'm always trying to share that with my students, that like this is really just all about being curious and being like, how does that work? Let me find out. And it's like if you can adopt that mentality instead of, I have to do this, and if I can't, well, I guess I'm just not that good. Like, it should be a really positive, joyful thing.
Absolutely. This was so good. This was such a good discussion. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I think this is something that we really want to see multiplied, that we want to live out individually, Destin and I, but also our teachers and our parents, that we can kind of adopt this mindset that we want this to be a place of encouragement, a place of growth, a place of discovery, a place where there can be comfort in just being creative and trying new things and just a positive atmosphere. And so we're excited to continue to explore this topic. And next time, we're thinking about addressing the idea of limitations, because I think that when we have a growth mindset, there's a danger that, we can do anything if we put our mind to it, and we have this slogan at the front of the door that says dream big, and we want to have this idea that, anything is possible. And that's so cool and so good and something that we do want to embrace. But yet there are limitations, there's natural limitations. Sure. And so what are those limitations? How do we navigate through those limitations? Kind of just delving into that a little bit more next time.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'm looking forward to it. Well, thank you for joining us today. This is the Pittsburgh School of the Arts podcast with Destin Lecornu and Sunset Place Studios and Kate Griffin. Thanks for listening today.